So yeah, I started doing yoga back in 1998 and I became a teacher 2003, 2004. And, I did it because it just basically made me a nicer person. There's more complexity to that and everything like that. But I felt like I genuinely was able to approach the world in a way that was more gracious and compassionate and spacious, which is why it's been a lifelong companion. And, the practices change, the kind of poses I do change. Sometimes it got fancier and then sometimes it got a lot simpler. It's not really about the poses or anything like that. It's actually just more about the connection with yourself in a space to recognize that you're not all the crazy thoughts in your head. And once you start realizing that you're not your stories, then you can start to live life, I think, with more awareness and really taking in, in our relationships, the people who are in front of us for who they are rather than all of the nonsense in our head sometimes. So when I was approaching 40, basically, I had this major breakdown about like, oh my gosh, where's my husband and my children? Oh, and I just broken up with like my long-term boyfriend who didn't want kids. And that led me to, I would love to say that I was like, namaste, like meditating and finding the wholeness within myself. No, I watched Downton Abbey and drank a lot of wine and ate a lot of popcorn.
Yeah.
Oh, Downton Abbey. And then at some point I thought, you know what, I need to take action in my life around this. And so I went out, I signed up for all the dating sites all at once, all of them. It's like a full-time job. It's so crazy. But as I started out, yeah, it was like Tinder, Bumble. Like my parents tried to get me to sign up for farmers.com because they live in Texas. They were serious. I was like, I don't think that's my demographic, but okay. But anyways, I started going out on all these dates and I started to recognize how the yoga that I'd been practicing, on the mat there was such a rich opportunity to integrate it into these dates. And what's wonderful about these dates is it's kind of this little laboratory, right? Where you show up, I'm nervous, like all of my habits rise to the surface, all of my nonsense, all of my stories. And there's a unique opportunity to practice being in the moment and seeing those things and really being a compassionate witness to ourselves. And those are exactly the things that wind up serving us in relationships. So I started theming about that with my students, and because I theme in classes and talk about real life, and they loved it. And that was really resonant. So that led me to write the book, Head Over Heels, A Yogi's Guide to Dating, which kind of is a chronology of some of those experiences and the learnings that I had through that very interesting process. So that's a little,
Oh, cool.
that's a little of, yeah, it was pretty fascinating. It was a really great learning experience. I mean, I think, I think our greatest learning experiences often come, sadly, but it's kind of the way that humans work, from times of suffering or times of friction, right? When we really encounter something that isn't the way we want it to be.
Right.
And so those are the times in my life where my yoga practice has become, it's always important, but it becomes sort of center of how vital it is and how nourishing it is to stay present in those moments of great intensity.
Yeah, it's so true. Although we might choose it to be otherwise, we'd like to just, read or hear about something and really learn it, but it just isn't the way our bodies and brains work a lot of times.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
It would be nice. It would be nice. And maybe sometimes we can learn that way, but I am glad that it doesn't feel like things are wasted. The hard times, the challenges, I feel like they definitely are kind of redeemable when we can look at it and say, okay, what can I pull from this? What can I see? What's been good? That's been really helpful over this last year with COVID too. Just all the craziness and all the things that we've lost, so to speak. It's been helpful to look at, well, what's good? What have we learned? And keep going, because especially with no real indication of an end in sight, I think with the vaccine and there is some hope and a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel now, but all through the year, I feel like it just has been, we don't know how long that we're going to need to be dealing with this. And so we just kind of need to figure out how to keep going. We've got homeschooling and just work being different and, you know, all kinds of stuff. Just the tension, like going grocery shopping, you know, so much more tension. And I just feel that from other people that I didn't want to be around, you know, these people that just looked upset. Feel it, you know?
Yeah. There is definitely like a common sense of stress and tension, right? Because whatever side you're on, like, you know, the side of everyone should be wearing a mask. Why are you not wearing a mask? You're such a jerk or whatever. To the other people who are like, why are you wearing a mask? You're such a jerk. Now I've gotten both ears of that because like I have an incredible liberal history in New York City and Vancouver. And I also have family in Texas and libertarians, like all these people and all these opinions, and no one is happy. No one is happy. So
so much division. But I really do believe that change begins with us. And when and I hope that I can bring a calm, you know, even as a person in the grocery store or wherever I am getting something, you know, I work to not be in a hurry and just say, you know, you're fine when people kind of feel flustered or you have to wait or whatnot. I feel like I just hope and pray that I can make a difference in being just calm myself. And part of that has been yoga, honestly, and just that taking the time for myself. So
it's amazing how important it is and how much it gets shuttled to the back. You know what I mean? How it feels because it's not urgent, right? It's like my mental health isn't urgent. It's just a nice to have. And so, and you can get away with that for a little while, but you notice that like over time, when we miss those tiny acts of self-kindness or self-care, then like a week later, there's a full-blown meltdown. It's kind of like, and I love what you were saying about being in the grocery store, because I feel as if it's really those small daily acts, those small little acts that really form the fabric of what is so important and what we can change. And I think when there's a pandemic that's global, we can start to feel very small or feel like, well, what can I do? Or I feel hopeless or I'm not making an impact. But to recognize that, no, it's not, you know, being Biden that's going to change the world. I mean, let him do him. Yeah, but it's me being nice to someone in the grocery store or calling my mom or being an ear for a frustrated friend or taking 3 minutes to breathe so that I can meet my family with equanimity where they are at. Like those little things are so important. And so I just loved hearing you mention that about being in the grocery store.
Thank you. Yeah, I do just think that lots of times the stuff that makes a big difference seems in the beginning to be small, but all the small things add up. And like you said, I think sometimes we skirt by with kind of shoving it out and kind of focusing on other stuff, but pretty soon we feel like we don't have any patience and, you know, we're getting headaches or body aches or just everybody's tense. And, you know, you have to take a step back and recognize what am I doing? What am I not doing? You know, take stock and then be intentional. And it's not too hard. I think sometimes I'm talking to people even in my counseling office about various things, but I talk to them about making some new habits and it doesn't have to be this big, you know, take an hour to do what you need to do. It's 10, 15, 20 minutes. That is going to make a difference. And you'll probably end up wanting to stretch it if you can, or insert it, you know, throughout your day. But just the point of it doesn't have to be a massive change or insertion, that it can start just really small. So I even started this breath app. I heard about it on a podcast, one of the gals that I really like, and it's breath work, and it just has like 2 to 3 minute things, and there's little exercises for if you want to feel more awake, if you want to have more energy, if you need to calm, if you want to sleep. It's really great. And there, you know, things that I've done a number of different types of breath work, but it's been really cool because I've learned a few new ones and just so simple. But
so simple. In fact, I wrote a book. I think this came out last year, the small book of yoga practices. And it's exactly that. It's this little cute little book, and it has like, it's called, I say, embrace the micro practice, right? So these things that are 2 minutes to 10 minutes long, which can absolutely change our state. They can drop us in, they can calm us down. Like if we're anxious, they can give us a lift and energize us if we're feeling depressed or lethargic. And it's like these beautiful little hits. And I think that's actually the start of, I don't really love the word self-mastery, but if, you know, in terms of taking responsibility for our state. And what's so cool about yoga is that is that it's like we kind of think that what our mind says is true, and yoga can teach us that there's an element to that, but if we change the state of our bodies, that changes the range of options that our mind can fathom. Like, if I'm depressed and I'm like, there's no option but lay on the couch or go to work, which is going to suck. Like, I don't see a range of possibilities. But then if in that I have the willpower, and sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, if I'm like, you know what, I'm going to hold plank for 1 minute, or I'm going to do breath of joy just like 9 times. And then all of a sudden, out of that physical change, I didn't have to change my mind. I didn't have to talk myself into anything. But by doing that, all of a sudden, the range of options changes, where I'm like, oh, I feel more options now. Now I have more sense of possibility. And when we start to realize that that's possible, that we don't have to believe it in order for it to work, and then we see that it works, and we're like, okay, I can have a little bit more control here of how I'm able to show up. And that's just like, wow. Like and again, hearing it or saying it is super easy. Doing it in the moment when I'm eating popcorn, watching Downton Abbey, and having a glass of wine and saying, forget it, like it's a different thing. But at least we're starting to move in that direction of going like, okay, I have another tool. And because we believe our mind so much, and this is part of it, is like in yoga is saying like, your mind might be right, but it might not. Let's create some space for finding out, right? And then we can maybe find something different.
Well, and sometimes I think our mind is made up because of what's going on outside of us. So the external circumstances, it doesn't seem like there's any other options, things are the way they are. Yet it's so powerful to recognize that once you do try and do something internally, like with your breath work and moving your body, and starting by feeling good inside, you can start to think, oh, well, maybe there is something else I can do, or maybe there is another possibility, like you were saying.
Absolutely.
Another option of feeling. So I just think it's really powerful when people realize or recognize how much power we do have within ourselves, when we take responsibility for where we're at, and when we make those decisions of how I'm feeling and what I'm going to do to be intentional about how I'm feeling. And coaching our thoughts and our mind too, so much is automatic. And if we're not careful, that automatic goes down a negative trail, and, you have to pull it back in. So, and that's, one of the things that I appreciate about yoga too, is just some of the intentionality of saying the different, whether it's a mantra or just kind of like you were saying, you said you do themed classes. Some of the themes that you do.
Oh my gosh, there's anything. Like it's different every time, but there are ones that I certainly come back to. My favorite way to theme is to really bring in a real life story, though it's kind of like, it could be anything. Like one of them is like, I went to, or like I had a disagreement with say I had a disagreement with my partner, and I really presumed that it was this way, and this happened, and then I realized that, oh, it wasn't. And, when we approach our yoga, anyway, so it could be anything. It could be how to show up and be present. And that the way that we do that off the mat, when we can practice that on the mat, then we can start to see our power to transform in our real life. Like one of the themes that I did, and it seems like such a banal thing, but I would talk about, oh, hey, last night I ate my food really fast. Right. And then I realized afterwards that I'd forgotten to taste and enjoy the whole thing. And this is sometimes how we do our yoga practice. Like we're doing it to get through it, or it's how we do our life. Like rather than savor the moment, which means slowing down and feeling, we rush to the end of it. And so then we kind of relate that to yoga practice. Like, okay, so in this practice, we're going to slow down and savor each moment. And then at the end of the practice, we kind of say like, okay, as we go into our lives, instead of rushing to the next thing all the time, can you actually be in the moment to enjoy it as you go? So that's like one example of how we might bring, right? Isn't that cool? Yeah. And it's infinite, but what I like about theming is that it finds a commonality. Like as much as we're all different, like we're all so different, everyone's different. But at the same time, I do feel like there are these core essential human experiences that we can all relate to. Like, when I say, I felt like my partner wasn't listening to me, or I felt shut down and I didn't know how to speak my truth, or wow, I really hate to say something that's going to disappoint someone. You know, like many of us can resonate with these and go like, oh my gosh, I feel that. And then together, like in yoga, we use that as, in my classes, we might use that as a theme and a way of practicing that lets us cultivate that sense of presence or awareness within us to change those things that feel habitually difficult. I mean, presence, it's all about presence, right? Because when we're awake in the moment, then I can make a different decision than the one I've been conditioned to.
Right. So. And you can feel, in that moment when you're working on it and you're taking that time, I just have experienced how you feel a different feeling, a sense from inside about whatever it is that you're kind of working on, trying to problem solve or process, what have you. So it helps just to put you in a new starting point, I feel like.
Yeah. There's more space. And I think that, when I think about the real gift of yoga, it's about sitting down. It's actually not about the practice. So the practice is great. Like you can do that, but you kind of do that in order to get to Shavasana where you're just kind of there. Right. And then it's like about, honestly. Yeah. And like pranayama, breath work too, is about moving us to the state of stillness where we can arrive in ourselves and be like, oh, like here I am outside of, because so often in our lives, we're chasing after something outside of us to make us feel good. Whether that's in relationship, I need you to tell me I'm pretty. I need you to tell me I'm safe, or I need you to do the things in order for me to feel loved. That's super common. We all love to do that. Or whether it's the job, I need the job, or I need the safety net, or I need the money, or I need the house. All of those things are ways of seeking something outside of us. This is very human, to fill that feeling of incompleteness that our mind kind of runs around with all the time. And then when we sit and we meditate or we practice and then we are settled and restful, we kind of go, well, there's nothing I need right now. There's nothing I'm actually okay. And it's that fundamental sense of okayness when we kind of touch into, I think it's always there, but we kind of hide it underneath all the crazy of our brains. And when we touch into that and we go, oh, then I don't need my partner to always be in a good mood. Then I don't need the job to work out perfectly for me to have a sense of, equanimity. I don't need my kids to behave a certain way because I think it reflects on me. There's, we're human, right? We're going to have like all of that kind of stuff. But the more we can touch into that space, I think the more room there is to let the world be as it is, and then to participate with a little bit more intention and a little bit maybe more compassion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. It's very, very well put though. That's good. Let's see, is there anything else that you would want to add before we talk about where people can find you online? And I know you've mentioned a couple of books, and I'll put that information in the chat too. Is there anything else that you would want to make sure we talk about?
I would just say, wherever you are in the world, I just really want to reaffirm what we chatted about, which was the little micro practices, those little moments. And even if you think you suck at meditation, it's like, just sit like 5 minutes a day, just to say, okay, I'm just going to do 5 minutes. And sometimes it feels like the hardest thing in the world. You're like, 5 minutes shouldn't be any big deal. Take 5 minutes, like do a couple stretches, sit, take a couple of deep breaths, and just make that your little space to reconnect. And that will start to create space and change things. Just like you said, we don't have to, take on a 2-hour yoga practice and suddenly get up at 4 a.m. every morning. Like, no, let's just start with 5 minutes, 2 stretches and some breathing. That's it. So I just wanted to share that this idea of this spiritual life or this yoga practice, it can feel so lofty and like out of reach, but it's actually about just getting out of our own way for a few minutes so that we can find just that nice sense of groundedness within ourselves. And when we can do that, it doesn't mean that the world goes away. Like I want to be really clear here that to me, I used to have this, and I'll just kind of share this, but I used to have this idea that people who did yoga would be really calm. Like they're like, I don't think that's true anymore. Yeah. I don't believe it at all. It's like now, but what I do think is that yoga, the practice of yoga and being in that settled space within us and touching down into that, what it does is it gives us a capacity, it widens our capacity to hold all of the human experiences that we have, whether that's loss, anxiety, depression, joy, longing, excitement, love, all of it. It just allows us to actually hold more of that with a sense of ease and equanimity. But we still in fact, I think yoga increases all of those feelings and experiences. And ultimately, I think what we want to do is use the yoga practice as a way to support our connection with our own aliveness, to be able to lean into that more, but with that spaciousness, so that then we can respond. We're not reactive or habitually kind of lashing out against things that feel uncomfortable, but we create this space and we're like, whoa, I'm really alive right now. Woo! That's a doozy, and that allows us to actually create more peace in the world, like in the supermarket where we give people space and, maybe they just really needed that. They needed to be in line first or whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You never know what your interaction can mean to somebody else. And I have heard, I'm a Christian, and going to church and them talking about meditating on scripture, people will say, well, I don't know how to meditate. What is that about? And I've heard it say that if you worry, you're meditating because you're just focusing on that thing. And so, so everybody knows how to meditate. It's just a matter of being intentional about what you're meditating on. So to sit and be still and just think, to choose what to think about and to be quiet and at peace where you're at, not always trying to do. We all are capable of that. So, so what is it that you would like to offer as a free gift? Oh, playing with the cords. Puppy.
Yes. Well, what I'll share with everybody is, and I'll send this to you afterwards, but is a link to the PDF of that book that I talked about earlier, which is called, it's a very cheeky title. It's a very silly title, I have to admit, but it's The Head Over Heels, A Yogi's Guide to Dating. But it's not really about dating. It's really about how we rediscover our own sense of wholeness, and then how we bring more integrity and are value driven in the way that we relate to those around us. And it's not just about boyfriends or something. It's about everybody. It's like my sister, my mother, the person at the supermarket, my aunt. It's all about having integrity and intentionality in our relationship. So I'd be very delighted to share that PDF with anyone who thinks it might be fun to have a read through. And if you're not familiar with the online dating world, you will learn something about that too, which is just pure silliness and challenging.
Yes. But I think it's great. I am sure it would be beneficial for any relationship, and it fits perfectly within this summit. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for taking the time to talk with me. And I'm sure we'll talk again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Bye.